Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 29, and I'm recording this Tuesday on my lunch break. Hopefully you're all doing well. I'm at the part of my job where I'll tell you it's a bit of a grind. You're just plugging along each day, doing your work, doing your meetings. No crazy milestones coming up in the immediate short term. But at the same time, you still got work to do. So I don't know. Not a lot exciting to report on my end, other than on the side I've been finishing up some Magic card collection stuff and enjoying getting ready for my wife's birthday next weekend. So yeah, that's about it. I know Live Team locked the patch today, and it's mostly buffs, which is nice to see. So especially in the 2 and 3 cost space. So yeah. I don't know. Should be fun. So anyway, as always, I've got some of your guys' questions, and let's dive right in. The first question is, when do you give a champion a unique trait? It used to be a few, but now it feels like every 5 cost, and even some 4 costs, have unique traits. So generally, the rule was a unique trait was something that we would explicitly use for 5 costs, and it was mostly to explain complicated rules that were atypical of a normal character. And so this would be something like, the very first time we did like 5 cost Jace, and you could put him on the front row or back row. Explaining that mechanic would go on the trait. And so anytime we had a complicated mechanic that was atypical, that got a unique trait. Now, over time, the other need that has popped up is with set 16, we had a bunch of threat-like units, but you can't have literally traitless units in the set. And so unique traits became another way to sort of make sure there was at least something there to have a trait, right? And so this would be like, if Shyvana literally just said Juggernaut, is that really that interesting? No, it also looks weird. So we've been giving, their passive auras. Now, I think if I'm being critical of ourselves, I do think we should probably make a better rule of what should be a passive, right? Like, why are Skarner and Tarek's passives just passives and not a trait, especially because they're team-wide, and it would make sense to put them on the trait web. Why are those not traits versus, like, what is a passive, right? And so I do think it's actually correct to be a little critical of us that, like, we could be more consistent with our rules here. We should be rules lawyering ourselves a little bit to what defines a unique trait versus what defines a passive trait. Maybe that's something I'll do. But those are the 2 needs that generally end up getting filled is, we need something on the trait bar. And I think in particular, if I'm looking at some of the future content we're developing, it's like that same need keeps arising as we figure out that, like, I don't know, Set 16 in particular really taught us some things about trait webs and what makes a good trait web. So having things that aren't necessarily connected to that trait web is doing some good. So we want to do more of that. But I agree, like I said, finding that line, I think, is going to be a good thing. So we should do that. Now, the other thing I'll say, though, is that in using unique traits more, currently unique traits are the first thing in your trait web. And so when you have like 4 or 5 of those, it looks really weird, especially when, like, the most important thing in your comp is 7 Demacia, but the first thing you're seeing is Galio's unique trait, Shyvana's unique trait, and, I don't know, Senna's unique trait. And it's like, that's not quite right. So some UX work to do there as well, because if unique traits are just going to be small little passives, do they need to be above 7 Demacia, which is like the key defining thing in your comp? Probably not. So yeah, I would agree, some work to do there, but overall, that's been why we've been doing it more. And I think honestly, it has done good things for the game to use it more. And I will probably encourage the team to continue to use it more because they do good things. So yeah, that's my answer. All right, next one's a silly one. If Sakurai approached you to add a TFT tactician to Smash, who would be your pick? So it's funny, someone asked me this question at Riot, someone higher up at the time, asked me this question of like, which character would you put in Smash Brothers from League of Legends? And I'll share with you the answer I gave them, which is the correct answer for like marketing and visibility and uniqueness is probably Ari. I think Ari is probably the champion I would put in Smash because it like most represents League while also being uniquely something that has like high player affinity. And I believe if you look at Smash Brothers, the things Ari can do are unique and not already covered in Smash Brothers, right? You could use her projectiles and her dash and like use the charm to do some cool things. And even do something with like nine-tailed mode versus non-nine-tailed mode that could be really cool. Kind of similar to how Joker works. So I think Ari has the most potential and is probably the right answer. I think the wrong answer that you could give and justify is Yasuo. I think Yasuo is another champion that, again, has high player affinity and is really exciting. But does Smash Brothers really need another sword fighter? No. Right? I think that's where it would be a really big miss to include someone like Yasuo. And then I also gave them my third answer, which is my personal favorite answer and I think would be fun. And it's kind of cool because 2XKO did some of this. But my silly answer was always Teemo. I believe Teemo in Smash Brothers could do some really unique things, throwing mushrooms, bouncing around, and he would just be somebody that like didn't look like the rest of the Smash Brothers roster. And so like Teemo fighting Mario to me just felt more interesting. But I'm somebody that likes those more interesting silhouettes. I mean, I play Malzahar, I played Skarner, but again, like from a marketing standpoint, Teemo is the wrong choice. So that was always my League of Legends answer. But now your question is TFT Tactician. And so again, sort of under that same lens, it's like, well, the wrong answer is probably like Pengu, because Pengu definitely represents TFT and would be, a good choice. But again, does TFT really need another sword fighter? Would he just like, what would Pengu do that's really that different than someone like Meta Knight, because already short, round dude with a sword. So it doesn't really fit the roster as well. So then I think your marketing decision that actually is unique for TFT would be, or for Smash, would be Chonk. I feel like Chonk has sort of become the secondary mascot of TFT, and he does some interesting things. He doesn't look like a lot of other people, although, I don't know, maybe he looks like King K. Rool a little bit, or King DDD. But you could do something fun with Chonk. But then I go back to, well, what's my third silly, like, that I would have fun with it answer? And I almost... my silly answer here, and it's funny, I have one sitting right here, but I'm gonna say Doughcat. I think Doughcat could actually do some really silly things and like break apart and almost get like an Ice Climbers-esque experience. But again, should you pick Doughcat from if we actually had that opportunity, would we actually want Doughcat in Smash? No, but it's funny. It's like the Teemo answer, it'd be silly and interesting from a gameplay and unique perspective. So yeah, that's kind of my answer. But I think the best answer in this scenario where Sakurai came to us is probably Chonk. So yeah. All right, next question. Have you considered putting in more power into components to make it more worth slamming them? So fun history point is this is actually something that happened either before dev or right after dev or very early on. But when Brad first made the item system, we had the same conversation, which was we want to put some power into the items, into the components, to make you at least consider slamming them and not the right answer to be holding them, right? And at the time, it was like, 10 AD, and it's like, well, if you have a sword sitting on your bench, that's 10 AD you can't get back, and like, but I think what happened was we really overestimated the amount of impact 10 AD can make. So each component doesn't actually have that much power right now, even though it was our intention to sort of have this slamming. I think the one thing we did was, and again, I can't remember exactly when, it was very early on, but we actually buffed a lot of the defensive components, right? Armor is 20 armor instead of 10. The MR is higher, the health is like 150. But again, same thing is like, we wanted them to have some power. And for a lot of items, you'll notice the actual base stats on the item don't go up that much. They just have whatever the component had worth of items, right? Like Ginsu's is a good example here where it's like Ginsu's kind of just has the AP from the rod, the attack speed from the bow, and its effect, you know? And so it would be weird. Like, let's use Ginsu's as the example. Do we really want to buff rod to 20 AP? Well, no, because then you'd lose AP when you made Ginsu's. That feels weird. But then, okay, so you're like, cool, well, so what if it's 20 AP, but then you nerf the effect of Ginsu's? It's like, well, but the fun part of an item is the unique effect. People don't want a 30 AD, 30 AP, gain 1% attack speed every second. They want to attack fast with Ginsu's, right? And so it's like, the more we just put into base stats, the less cool stuff we can put into the effect of the item. And so that's always been kind of the conundrum here. So overall, I think it's one of those things where, again, if you told me 5 more AD on a sword, sure, but will it actually change player behavior? I don't think so. I think right now players are already doing this to some extent. And I think that having any more power in the components just makes the base items less interesting. And the other thing I'll say is that generally right now we're trying to sort of like deflate items. Right now, one of the things I'm quote unquote the least happy with TFT, and I say this with an asterisk of like, I'm not that unhappy, but I'm just like, man, in a world with infinite time, is that right now items determine more of your success than like champs and traits sometimes. And so I don't know that that's correct. So the idea of putting more power into that item system, I'm not a huge fan of. So all this is to say is that, have we considered it? Yep, we've considered it. And overall, it doesn't seem worth doing right now. So probably not interested in doing that. So cool. All right. Next question was another kind of silly one. When someone mentions TFT to you, is your brain wired to think work or fun? And this was coming from somebody who was asking about like, hey, I'm in a pretty high octane work environment, and sometimes it's hard to turn the brain off, when thinking about that. So first, to answer your question, is my brain wired to think work or fun? I think the answer between those two choices is work. I think the better answer is purpose. Right now, for better or worse, I believe it is my purpose, or at least one of my purposes, I should say, because my main purpose is to be a father and husband. But I think beyond that, one of the ways I do that is by providing, and I provide by my purpose being to make TFT a very fun game for players and doing that well. And so I think that is my purpose, which is work, but I also find a lot of gratification in accomplishing my purpose well. One of the things that drives me is, recognition. And when I say recognition, I don't literally mean like fame. I mean like knowing the satisfaction that I did a good job and seeing players enjoy the thing I did, knowing that the decisions I made can be factually marked as correct, is a lot of satisfaction for me. And so in a way, it is fun for me to think of like, Acole and I were just talking about this the other day, but I remember, God, what set was it? But whenever we changed AD to be from base to percent, the way that happened was I just woke up one morning and was like, I'm tired of dealing with this balance problem. I need to fix it. Wrote the proposal, got it all out, and came in Monday and said, we're doing this. And everyone was like, Mort, what are you doing? Could you stop screwing up all of our systems? What are you doing? And I'm like, no. We're doing this. Trust me. And we did it. And it worked, and it was good, and everything was fine. And I'm sure someone probably thinks that like, well, was it even worth doing? I don't know. Though I would argue to this day, yes. But that feeling of accomplishment of just like, I see a problem, I'm going to fix it. I have a good idea, I fixed it. And now the game is better. That is fun for me and is part of my purpose. Now, all of that being said, though, what I'll also share with you is over the last 2 years, intermittently, here and there, definitely gotten the closest to burnout I've ever been in my career. And what I have found, especially I'll use, magic as the example here, is like I have needed to find things that I cannot possibly interpret as work. right? And so like collecting and organizing cards, I mean, the closest thing you can call it is work is the OCD organization I do with the cards, but it's not actually work, and so having something to really separate that. It's actually why playing video games for me has actually dropped down a little bit, though. So it's funny, playing a new game, like for example, I want to play Mugenics this weekend really bad, but it will be difficult because I will probably look at that game and sort of analyze it and go, what are some good things? What are some things I do differently? Yada, 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 because I'm just a game designer and that's how my brain works. So I can't really enjoy it as much as, something that would take my mind off things. But old games where I have nothing left to learn are actually how I do this, right? So this is like doing a Chrono Trigger run, or I posted this weekend, I played through Super Metroid again. It's just like, yeah, it's a comfort food, right? Those are the ways I have not worked. So my recommendation to you is find the things that you know are not work, that you can take your mind off things and distract you and enjoy. And that's how you take your mind off stuff. But if you're truly obsessive like I can be, and it's your purpose, there's only so much you can do, and your brain is going to hardwire play things. I told you I think my account right now is sitting at 70 LP. I was at 400 at one point, or 500. I don't know. Because again, all I want to do is like test the game and push it to its limits and know the balance could be even better. Even though I'm not even supposed to be working on balance. I'm supposed to be in future land, and in fact, yeah. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question, though I kind of went off the rails a little bit there. But yeah, I think it can be hard. It can be hard, and especially in a world today where like a lot of us drive our identities from the things we do and the things we enjoy, it can be tough. So, all right, last question. What time are we at? I got plenty of time. I'm blazing through these. I probably should have wrote down another question. The next question here is, you once said Dragonmancer type traits are not healthy. Do you believe the super unit fantasy can ever be balanced for people who enjoy it? The answer to this is, even if I believed the answer was no, we have to keep trying it. We have to. Because the super unit fantasy is a very, very resonant fantasy, right? It is probably one of the most resonant fantasies in TFT, because generally it's like, what do you want to do with your comp? You want to have a really, really cool carry. You want to funnel as much power into that carry as you can. The reason Dragonmancer in particular was unhealthy was it took essentially an entire 8-piece vertical and distributed all the power of an 8-piece vertical. And if we use our typical framework for an 8-piece would be that you get to amplify the units 80%. That's a rough framework for traits. And so instead of 8 units by 80%, that all got channeled into 1 unit. And so that number ended up having to be pretty freaking insane, right? And I think we undershot it really from a balance standpoint, but it's just like, yeah, it turns out if you have 1 unit that's getting 300 or 400% extra power, it's too much. It's too much, so that's not healthy. But does that mean all super units are completely flawed? No, right? If you told me, a 3-piece trait channels all of its power into 1 unit, that doesn't bother me, right? Instead of 30% to 3 units, you get 70% to 1 unit. Okay, that's fine, So it's just a question of where's the line of how much power we can channel into that super unit. Another example here actually is the dragon, I forget the name of it, but it's one of the champion augments, the one that gives you a Mogul's Mail and turns you into a dragon, right? It gives you 700 HP and some durability and a Mogul. Like, that's essentially channeling a bunch of power of your augment into 1 unit, right? Heavy as the Crown is another example. It channels the power of an augment into 1 unit. And that's fine, right? So it's really just a question of how much power can you get away with channeling into 1 unit. Now, why this is especially dangerous is, let's take a typical army for a second, okay? A typical army at level 8 is 8 units, probably 2 to 4 backliners, and 4 to 6 frontliners, give or take. And you have items probably on 3 units, approximately, right? Your primary tank, your primary carry, and then either a secondary tank or a secondary carry. And again, I know there's games where there's more than this, based on augments, based on encounters, but an average game, you might have 3 characters fully itemized, okay? So you have 8 characters and 3 are fully itemized, 2 of which, so then if you take something like Dragonmancer again, and if you make 8 units 80% better or whatever, well, only 3 of them are getting the multiplicative power from items, whereas the other 5, they're not getting full multiplicative power, which is being diffused, which is a good thing. But now let's make a fake trait that says, hey, the unit, take any unit and absorb the 3 units next to them, okay? So it's like now instead of 8 units on your team, you have 2 super units, a super tank and a super carry. Okay, sounds like that should be pretty close to balanced, right? Well, no, because now it's almost like the items are on all 8 units, because all the items are on those 2 super units, which means all the stats from those units are being multiplied, right? And so there comes a math problem where it's like, okay, well then how much power can you give? Well, it turns out it can only give like 30% of their stats because of the multiplicative nature. But then it's like, okay, well then that one unit gets stunned, right? Now all of a sudden a stun is actually more power for the enemy, right? And so all of your different inputs and outputs get completely messed up by the concept of a super unit, right? The ability to stun 3 of 8 units is kind of strong. The ability to stun 3 of 3 units is incredibly strong, right? Skarner would destroy a super unit. And so then you'll see us do stuff like, okay, well, the super unit is immune to CC. Okay, well, now you've just made a bunch of CC units useless, right? And so, and we even have debates around this where it's like, well, that's just sharp and interesting. Why are you getting rid of all the sharp and interesting experiences? And it's like, well, because our systems do still have to work in an intuitive manner. And a super unit can break those systems and cause a breakdown of expectations. And so when you have a 20,000 HP super unit like Dragonmancer Nunu running at you, killing everything, and it is mathematically stat check impossible for you to do enough damage to it before it generates enough mana to go infinite, that's not very fun, So all of that is the big challenge. And I just listed out a bunch of reasons why it's hard. But again, I will stress that despite everything I just said, will we ship super units again in TFT? 100%. Because we know they're resonant, we know they're exciting, we know they're fun. So it's up to us to figure out what's the version of this that works. Keep experimenting, keep trying to break the rules, right? Is it a 2-piece trait like Colossus? Is it a 3-piece trait like Mech? Is it more? Is it less? Is it through augments? Is it through items? Is there an artifact? All of these different things that should be experimented on to try to make the super unit fantasy work and be exciting and be healthy for gameplay. So yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. So that's it for questions today. The only other thing to talk about is I don't know how many more episodes of this I'm going to do for this season. We're getting to a point where I could work on some other stuff. I'm also dealing with some small stuff in my head, and I don't know, it might be a good time to like take a month off and then come back for season 3. It's definitely not like if I decide to stop, I'll tell you guys. And it would be like a small break. Certainly as the next set comes out, I know we'll want to pick this back up. But it might be a good like give it a season break and have a thing. I don't know. I'm still deciding, but letting you guys know that I'm at least considering it, so it won't be a surprise if it happens. But yeah, just something to think about. So, okay. Anyway, that's it. My lunch break is over. I see some people messaging me on Slack, so I should go answer them. So, cool. All right. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.